The screen showed Sarah, my wife, laughing as Dennis Nelson pulled her closer by the pool. Their lips met in a slow, deliberate kiss, the kind meant for private moments. My new drone, Sarah's gift, hung in the air, broadcasting the betrayal directly into my hands. Then, a text from her. Running late, still with clients. Mark Jensen prided himself on his keen eye for detail. As a corporate systems analyst at Donaldson's, a regional insurance provider, his job was to find the hidden glitches, the logical flaws that others missed. He was good at it, very good. At 29, he'd built a reputation for efficiency, for spotting the unsaid problems lurking beneath the surface of quarterly reports or network schematics. He applied this same rigor to his personal bond in believing he had constructed a solid foundation, especially in his marriage to Sarah. 3 years in, they had a tidy house, 2 reliable cars, and a routine that felt both comfortable and secure. The Independence Day weekend had started early, a generous gesture from management at Donaldson's. The office emptied out by noon, a hum of anticipation filling the air as employees scattered toward their long weekend plans. Mark, however, had one immediate priority, his new Shaba drone. Sarah had given it to him for his birthday last month, a sleek black machine with a high-definition camera. He had always loved the idea of flight, a childhood fascination rekindled by this new toy. He pictured himself navigating it over the cornfields outside town, or maybe even capturing some aerial footage of the upcoming 4th of July parade. He pulled into his driveway, the mid-July sun glinting off the polished hood of his sensible sedan. Sarah's Lexus wasn't there. That wasn't unusual. As a junior real estate agent, her schedule could be unpredictable. She had mentioned showing a few properties that afternoon. He pulled out his phone, a quick text to check in. No immediate reply. He tried her company cell. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. The standard cheerful message playing. A flicker of something, not quite concern, but a small, unusual prickle registered in his mind. Sarah usually kept that phone close, especially when clients were involved. He set up the drone in the backyard, its rotors a soft buzz in the still summer air. The neighborhood was quiet, most people already off to lake houses or family barbecues. He guided the drone upward, a familiar thrill washing over him as he saw his house shrink beneath it, the neat rows of his garden, the freshly mown lawn. He flew it over his street, then over the next, enjoying the feeling of omnipotence, the detachment of seeing the world from above. He steered it north, toward the George Orwell section of town, a slightly wealthier area with bigger lots and houses that tended toward modern architecture, all sharp angles and oversized windows. That's when he saw it. A flash of bright red, unmistakable. Sarah's Lexus. It was parked 2 streets over, 3 houses down from the corner, pulled half onto the grass verge of a well-maintained lawn. The address, he noted, belonged to Dennis Nelson. Dennis was a casual acquaintance, an older man, a divorcee who worked in finance and lived alone. Mark knew him from occasional Rotary Club meetings, and a brief exchange of pleasantries. Sarah had no business being at Dennis Nelson's house. A cold knot formed in Mark's stomach, tightening with a quick, uncomfortable grip. His hands, steady moments before, now had a slight tremor as he adjusted the drone's controls. He didn't think, he just acted, guiding the drone lower, closer. The view on his phone screen sharpened, resolving into the crisp details of Dennis Nelson's manicured backyard. There was a swimming pool, sparkling blue, in a patio area with expensive-looking lounge chairs. Then he saw them. Sarah, his wife, in a bright summer dress, her arm linked with Dennis Nelson's. They were standing by the edge of the pool, laughing, their heads close together. Mark's breath hitched. He watched, unable to look away, as Dennis reached out, his hand resting on Sarah's hip, pulling her in. Their lips met. It was a slow, deliberate kiss, too intimate, too casual for anything but an illicit embrace. The drone's camera, crystal clear, zoomed slightly, offering an undeniable, brutal confirmation. "No, this isn't real," Mark whispered, the words thin and reedy in the quiet afternoon. He watched them for another agonizing minute, their bodies pressed together, a scene unfolding in broad daylight in someone else's backyard. His finger, almost on its own, found the record button. The small red light blinked, capturing every second, a silent, indisputable testament to her betrayal. The world, which had felt so meticulously constructed, so perfectly ordered just minutes ago, shattered around him. The joy of flying, of seeing things from a different perspective, evaporated, replaced by a profound, gut-wrenching sickness. He brought the drone down, landing it gently on the grass, his hands shaking violently now. He stared at the small screen, the image of Sarah and Dennis burned into his mind. He retreated inside, the cool air of his house offering no comfort. The footage was there, undeniable, a raw wound festering deep within him. The small screen of his phone felt heavy in Mark's hand. He pressed play, and the digital clock in the corner of the video advanced, frame by agonizing frame. The initial shock had begun to recede, replaced by a cold, meticulous anger. He recognized Dennis Nelson's backyard, the precise angle of the pool's diving board, the same patio furniture. And there they were, Sarah, his wife, and the man. Not Dennis Nelson as he'd initially assumed in his dazed state, but Gary Hayes. Mark had seen Gary at a few Rotary functions with Dennis, his business partner, a man with a hearty laugh and a receding hairline. Gary was a local developer, known for renovating historic downtown buildings. The confirmation settled in Mark's gut, a hard, cold lump. It wasn't just a random act. It was with someone connected, someone he knew, albeit distantly. He watched the entire sequence again, his analyst's mind cataloging details. The way Sarah leaned into Gary, the easy familiarity of their embrace, the duration of the kiss. There was no doubt, no room for misinterpretation. This was not a friendly exchange. This was intimate. Mark closed the video, the image seared into his memory. His first thought was to confront her, to scream, to demand answers, but a deeper, colder instinct prevailed. He needed to be calm, he needed a plan. For the next few hours, he rehearsed in his mind, practicing the neutral expression he would wear, the casual questions he would ask. He would act normal, hide the crushing weight of this discovery. He would wear a mask. Sarah arrived home just after 6. Her Lexus pulled into the driveway, its engine cooling with a soft ping. He heard her keys in the lock, the familiar click. "Mark, I'm home." Her voice was light, cheerful. She walked into the living room, dropping her purse on the entryway table. "Rough day," showed 3 properties, then spent an hour with the Petersons talking financing. "They're still on the fence." She gave him a tired but sweet smile, oblivious. Or so it seemed. Mark forced his lips into a semblance of a smile. "Long day, huh? You want a drink?" "I was just about to make a gin and tonic." He kept his voice even, his movements deliberate. She nodded, running a hand through her hair. "Sounds perfect." He watched her, every gesture, every word. The easy way she settled onto the couch, the way her eyes darted to her phone. He went through the motions of their evening routine, mixing drinks, discussing mundane neighborhood news, making light dinner plans. Every time her hand brushed his, a wave of revulsion, cold and sharp, went through him. He imagined Gary Hayes' hand on her, the memory of the footage, a constant loop behind his eyes. Sleep was impossible. He lay beside her, rigid and awake, the space between them feeling like a vast, dark chasm. He pictured Sarah laughing with Gary, their bodies pressed together. He saw her face, the same face that now lay peaceful and innocent on the pillow next to him, twisted in an intimate moment with another man. The images repeated, relentless, until the first hint of dawn lightened the sky outside their window. Over the next few days, the Independence Day holiday stretched out, providing ample time for Mark to observe. He noticed the subtle things, Sarah's increased attention to her phone, the quick way she'd flip it face down if he walked into the room, a slight eagerness in her voice when she mentioned new clients. Before, these would have been dismissed. Now they were damning evidence, each a small confirmation of her deceit. He pretended to be busy with work on his laptop, but his mind was consumed, dissecting her behavior, replaying the footage. He used his corporate analyst skills for a different kind of investigation. While Sarah was out showing properties, he researched Gary Hayes. He learned Gary was indeed married with 2 children and lived in an expensive development across town. This detail intensified Mark's feelings of injustice, adding another layer to the betrayal. It wasn't just his marriage. It was a violation with broader implications, a ripple effect through other lives. The urge to confront Sarah, to throw the footage in her face was powerful, but he resisted. He needed to be smarter, more strategic. An outburst would surrender control to her, allow her to dictate the narrative. He wanted to maintain the upper hand. He would not give her that satisfaction. Instead, he took the drone footage and downloaded it to an encrypted drive, then backed it up again, ensuring the evidence was secure and undeniable. He felt a profound shift within him, moving beyond raw emotion to a colder, more calculated response. The sting was still there, a constant dull ache, but it was now compartmentalized, fueling his resolve. He felt an immense, suffocating sense of isolation. He couldn't confide in anyone, not his parents, not his best friend. This was his burden, his shattered world to navigate alone. He stared at their wedding photograph on the mantelpiece, the younger, happier versions of themselves smiling back. How could she do this to us, he wondered, the question echoing in the quiet of their home, a quiet that now felt filled with unspoken lies, a heavy blanket pressing down on everything. The mask of normalcy felt increasingly heavy, but Mark maintained it with the precision of a surgeon. His corporate systems analyst skills, usually reserved for tracking data anomalies, were now directed at Sarah's life. He began covertly monitoring her movements. He'd check her car's odometer before she left for work, then again when she returned. He installed a GPS tracker on her Lexus, a small device he'd bought online and hidden beneath the rear bumper. He knew her routine, the places she claimed to be. Now he verified them. Within days, inconsistencies emerged. A supposed all-day client meeting in Springfield ended with her car parked at the local gym 2 hours before she said she'd be back. Calls she claimed were with a client's broker were shorter than usual, followed by bursts of text to an unknown number. He even used the drone again, guiding it discreetly on clear afternoons when he knew she was supposedly out showing properties in other parts of the county. Twice, he recorded her Lexus parked blocks away from Gary Hayes' office building, and once, a casual lunch meeting between them at a cafe Mark knew they wouldn't normally frequent for business. The images were less dramatic than the pool scene, but no less damning, showing an ongoing pattern. This was not enough, he decided. He needed more. He needed official evidence, something admissible in court, something a drone video might not fully provide on its own. He remembered Roger Peterson, a former colleague from his security analyst days, who had left the corporate world to start his own private investigation firm. Roger had always been sharp, discreet, and utterly thorough. Mark made the call from a burner phone he'd purchased at a gas station, speaking in measured, calm tones. "Roger, it's Mark Jensen. I need some discreet assistance. Personal matter." Roger, a man of few words, understood immediately. "Send me the details, Mark. I'll take a look." A week later, Roger's report landed in Mark's encrypted inbox. It was meticulous, cold, and devastating. Detailed logs of Sarah's whereabouts, confirmed meetings with Gary Hayes, photographs of them entering a discreet downtown apartment building, often during what Sarah claimed were late client consultations. The report even included copies of restaurant receipts and hotel parking stubs. Gary Hayes was married, the report confirmed, with 2 children. This wasn't just a fling, it was a calculated, ongoing affair. The PI's evidence piled onto Mark's own, a mountain of undeniable proof. Mark spent hours organizing everything. The drone footage, Roger's reports, printouts of suspicious phone logs he'd extracted from their shared billing statement, even a few minor financial discrepancies he'd noticed in their joint account. Small withdrawals Sarah couldn't easily explain. Each piece of evidence was meticulously labeled, dated, and stored on multiple encrypted drives. He was building his case not just for a divorce, but for something more. He started considering the financial implications. Their house, their savings, her real estate commissions. He was the primary earner. His career at Donaldson's stable and lucrative. He wanted to protect his assets, to ensure this betrayal didn't also cost him his financial future. The thought of confronting her still lingered, but it was now overshadowed by a cold, strategic calculation. One afternoon, he requested a meeting with Mr. Albright, his boss, under the guise of discussing project workload. Mr. Albright, a seasoned veteran of corporate politics and personal upheavals, listened patiently. Mark phrased his situation carefully, avoiding specifics, describing it as a deeply personal, high-stakes problem that requires a significant portion of my mental bandwidth, and I want to ensure it doesn't impact my focus here. He spoke of needing to resolve it cleanly, efficiently, with minimal collateral damage to his professional life. Mr. Albright leaned back in his leather chair, a knowing look in his eyes. "Mark," he said, his voice calm, "life happens. We all deal with our own devils. The important thing is to deal with them, not let them fester. If you need a few days, take them. Just make sure when you come back, your head's clear. Personal issues bleed into professional life if you don't cut them out cleanly." He offered a brief, empathetic nod. "You're a valuable asset, Mark. We support our people." Mark left Mr. Albright's office feeling a strange mix of relief and hardening resolve. He wouldn't just divorce her, he would ensure Sarah and Gary faced the full weight of their actions. This wasn't just about his pain anymore. It was about justice. "They chose this path," he muttered to himself in the car, the words cementing his decision. He began to detach emotionally from Sarah, viewing her less as his wife and more as a problem to be solved, an equation with too many variables. The love, or what he thought was love, withered, replaced by a cold, strategic imperative. The legal preparations began, quietly and methodically. He researched divorce laws online, focusing on the differences between no-fault and at-fault claims in their state. He wanted to understand every lover, every consequence. He wanted to win. Mark Jensen sat across from Mr. Evans, the divorce attorney. The office was understated, professional, with framed law degrees lining one wall. Mark laid out his meticulously organized binders, the drone footage on an encrypted tablet, Roger Peterson's PI reports, detailed phone records, financial printouts, and his own careful timeline of events. He spoke calmly, factually, presenting the evidence like a corporate systems analyst debugging a flawed network. Mr. Evans, a man whose weary eyes had seen countless domestic battles, listened intently, occasionally nodding. When Mark finished, Mr. Evans leaned forward. "Mr. Jensen, in my 20 years, I've rarely seen a client come in with such a comprehensive, watertight case. The drone footage, coupled with the PI's reports, is undeniably strong. Your attention to detail is remarkable." He paused, looking directly at Mark. "We have options. We can pursue an at-fault divorce, given the clear evidence of adultery, which could certainly impact asset division and potential alimony. Or we can proceed with a no-fault, but use this evidence as leverage during negotiations." Mark had considered the explosive public reveal, the immediate confrontation. But that felt too emotional, too messy. He wanted control, precision. "I want to proceed strategically, Mr. Evans," Mark stated. "I don't want to detonate a bomb. I want to set a series of controlled charges. I want them both to feel the consequences, slowly, thoroughly." His first strategic charge was a subtle leak. He drafted an anonymous email, vague enough to be deniable, yet specific enough to ignite suspicion. He sent it to a few carefully chosen individuals within the local Rotary Club, men who knew Gary Hayes and also socialized with Gary's wife, Susan. The email mentioned rumors of Gary Hayes' extracurricular activities and hinted at inappropriate workplace conduct involving a local real estate agent. No names, no dates, just enough to plant the seed. He knew how quickly gossip spread in their small, close-knit community. Susan Hayes would hear it eventually. Next, he turned his attention to Sarah's professional life. He orchestrated an anonymous tip to Frank Miller, Sarah's boss at Prestige Real Estate. Frank Miller was a no-nonsense individual, a man who valued integrity and reputation above all else. The tip was concise. Unprofessional conduct by an agent, Sarah Jensen, during stated work hours, involving extensive unauthorized absences and personal relationships instead of client meetings. Check her GPS logs. Again, no specific accusations, just a nudge towards an uncomfortable truth. Mark knew Frank would not tolerate anything that could tarnish his company's standing. Frank Miller, a man with a reputation for sharp business ethics, wouldn't let that slide. He would begin his own quiet investigation, pulling GPS data from company phones, checking client appointments. At home, Mark continued to maintain his facade of normalcy. He would ask Sarah about her day, listen to her accounts of showing properties, nod, and offer suggestions for dinner. He helped with chores, went for walks with her. Every touch, every shared laugh felt like a raw betrayal, a sharp shard of glass in his gut. He saw the subtle shift in their relationship, a growing distance she couldn't quite pinpoint. She'd ask, "Is everything all right, Mark? You seem quiet." He'd offer a non-committal response. "Just a lot on my mind with work, that big project at Donaldson's." He watched her, knowing she was oblivious, still living in the comfortable lie. This continued performance was excruciating, yet necessary. Meanwhile, the seeds Mark had planted began to sprout. Susan Hayes, Gary's wife, a quiet woman Mark had only met briefly, received an anonymous email. It contained a slightly blurred photo, taken from a distance, of Gary and Sarah at the cafe Mark had earlier identified, along with a few carefully chosen hints about lunch meetings that run long and afternoon detours. The email was crafted to provoke suspicion, not outright accusation. Susan, already attuned to the subtle shifts in her husband's routine, felt a cold dread. She started her own quiet investigation, checking Gary's phone, asking more pointed questions, noticing the quick defensiveness in his replies. Mark felt a grim, almost detached satisfaction. The wheels of consequence were turning, slowly, inexorably. He observed Sarah across the dinner table, her face illuminated by the soft light, and thought, justice is a slow burn. The tension in their home became almost palpable to him, a heavy, unspoken presence, though Sarah seemed completely unaware. He continued to excel at work, pouring his focus into corporate problems, using the intellectual challenge as an escape, a way to channel the cold fury that simmered beneath his composed exterior. The first domino fell on a Tuesday morning. Mark received an email, a terse professional message from Roger Peterson. Status update: Frank Miller just concluded his meeting with your wife. Confirmed. See attached. Attached was a brief summary. Frank Miller, after cross-referencing Sarah's GPS logs with her reported appointments and client call times, had gathered enough data. He had confronted Sarah in his office. She had initially denied everything, tried to spin stories about last-minute client changes and unexpected detours. But Frank Miller was thorough. The evidence of company car misuse for personal, unauthorized trips, the gaps in her schedule, the suspicious patterns of phone activity, it was too much. Frank hadn't raised his voice, Roger reported, but his resolve was clear. He fired Sarah on the spot, citing unprofessional conduct and a critical breach of trust. Her real estate license would likely be impacted, and her career in the local market was effectively over. Mark read the email, a grim satisfaction spreading through him. One down. Later that afternoon, the second domino. His phone vibrated with a text from Roger Peterson. Hayes household, major domestic disturbance. Police called, but no charges. Wife initiated divorce proceedings, going for full exposure. Mark pictured the scene, a public argument, the truth finally erupting. Susan Hayes, armed with the vague hints from the anonymous emails in her own quiet investigation, had confronted Gary. The blurred photo, the casual mentions of long lunches, it had been enough for her to start digging. She'd found her own evidence, small things, but enough to corner him. Gary, finally faced with an infuriated wife and undeniable suspicions, had confessed. Not out of remorse, Mark suspected, but because he saw no other way out. Susan had wasted no time. Her lawyer was already drafting papers, demanding a significant settlement and making sure their entire social circle knew precisely why. The stage was set. Mark waited until Sarah returned home, defeated and hollow-eyed from her meeting with Frank Miller. She walked in, her purse dropping with a thud onto the floor. "Mark," she started, her voice thin. He fired me." Tears welled in her eyes, not from remorse, Mark noticed, but from the shock of her professional world collapsing. She still didn't know the extent of what was coming. "I know," Mark said, his voice flat, devoid of warmth or anger. He watched her, his own emotions compartmentalized, replaced by a cold clarity. He walked over to the living room table where he had carefully arranged his evidence. "Sit down, Sarah." She looked at him, confused, still processing her own immediate catastrophe. He gestured to the couch. She sat slowly, her eyes wide. He picked up his tablet, pressing play. The drone footage filled the screen. Sarah by the pool intertwined with Gary Hayes. Her face, her laughter, their kiss all played out in high definition. Her jaw dropped. "No," she whispered, her eyes fixed on the screen, then on him. "Mark, what is this?" He didn't answer, letting the video play out. Then he placed Roger's detailed PI reports in front of her, the dates, the locations, the photographs of her and Gary entering the discreet downtown building. Finally, he handed her the email from Frank Miller, her termination letter attached. She skimmed it, her eyes darting between the documents, then back to his face. Her denials, which had been so quick with Frank Miller, crumbled. The shock on her face was profound, followed by a desperate, panicked plea for forgiveness. "Mark, please," she choked out, tears finally streaming down her face. "It was a mistake, a terrible mistake. I swear it meant nothing. I love you, Mark. Please, we can fix this." She reached for his hand. He pulled his hand back, a slight, almost imperceptible movement. "There's nothing left to forgive, Sarah," he stated, his voice a steady drone, completely devoid of emotion. "I filed for divorce 3 days ago." He saw the color drain from her face. "My lawyer, Mr. Evans, will be in touch. He has copies of all of this." He gestured to the pile of evidence. "And more. He also knows about Gary Hayes and his wife." Sarah stared at him, her eyes wide with a dawning, terrifying realization. The full scope of his meticulous revenge, the quiet, calculated dismantling of her life, hit her all at once. Her world imploded. "You did this?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You planned all of this?" She tried to manipulate him, to rekindle their past. "Mark, remember our wedding? Remember when we first met? We had so much. Please don't throw it all away." She tried to touch his arm again, her eyes pleading, but Mark remained unmoved, a wall of cold stone. The person she thought she knew was gone. The quiet house, which had been suffocatingly silent for weeks, now erupted in a bitter, raw argument. Her pleas turned to accusations, her desperation to anger. Every hidden wound, every unspoken resentment was laid bare. He stood his ground, letting her words wash over him, feeling nothing but a chilling sense of finality. If you're wondering how life's costly choices unfold, stick around to the end to see how they truly play out. The small Midwestern town had always thrived on its quiet stability, but now it hummed with gossip. The divorces of Mark and Sarah Jensen, and Gary and Susan Hayes, quickly became the talk of every coffee shop, church potluck, and supermarket aisle. It was a scandal that involved 2 respectable families, a well-known developer and a real estate agent. Everyone had an opinion. Mark's divorce proceedings began with Sarah's legal team attempting to salvage her reputation and minimize her losses. Her lawyer, a smooth-talking woman from the city, tried to paint Mark as a vindictive spouse, exaggerating the affair and seeking to destroy Sarah's life. But Mr. Evans was ready. He systematically presented the evidence. The drone footage, crystal clear, showing the intimate embrace. Roger Peterson's detailed reports with dates, times, and locations. The financial discrepancies, minor but suggestive. And the crushing blow of Frank Miller's termination letter, laying bare Sarah's professional misconduct. There was little room for Sarah to maneuver, her denials falling flat against the undeniable truth. Sarah faced immediate public shunning. Her attempts to find new work were met with polite rejections, or sometimes outright silence. In a town where reputation was currency, hers was devalued, tainted. The network of acquaintances and former colleagues evaporated. She was isolated, a pariah in her own community. The ripple effect continued. Gary Hayes' business partnership with Dennis Nelson, a cornerstone of local development, dissolved amidst the scandal. Dennis, a man who valued his good name, couldn't afford to be associated with such public disgrace. Gary, financially damaged and professionally disgraced, lost not only his wife and family, but also a significant portion of his income and standing in the community. Dennis Nelson, caught in the crossfire, had expressed his anger directly. Mark heard through Roger Peterson that Dennis had confronted both Gary and Sarah separately, furious at the embarrassment and financial hit they had brought upon his business. "You made your bid," Dennis had reportedly told Gary. "Now you lie in it. You cost me a fortune." Mark dealt with the emotional toll of the public scrutiny in his own way. He found solace in his work, pouring himself into complex systems analysis projects at Donaldson's, where his focus remained razor-sharp. A few trusted friends, old college buddies who lived out of town, offered quiet support, mostly through late-night phone calls where Mark rarely spoke of the affair, but rather the cold mechanics of his actions. During those lonely nights, Mark would sometimes find himself staring at the ceiling, the house silent around him. Did I go too far? He pondered. The question hung heavy in the air. He hadn't sought to destroy them, not initially, but as he had built his case, the methodical pursuit of justice had taken on a life of its own, an almost surgical precision that left deep, irreparable wounds. The pain he inflicted was undeniable, visible in Sarah's hollow eyes during court appearances, in the whispers he overheard at the grocery store. Was it justified? He didn't have a clear answer. He only knew it felt necessary. His quiet, ordered life was now anything but. It was marked by legal documents, court dates, and the inescapable hum of public whispers. The community, like any small town, took sides. Some condemned Mark's coldness, his methodical approach to revenge, seeing him as vindictive. Others supported his right to seek justice, believing Sarah and Gary deserved what they got for their betrayal. Mark tried to tune out the noise, focusing instead on what came next. His focus began to shift from the pursuit of revenge to the more difficult task of rebuilding his own life. He needed to emerge from the wreckage intact, to reclaim his peace. He put their shared house on the market. It sold quickly, the last physical tie to his marriage severed. He moved into a smaller, modern apartment on the edge of town, a clean slate, a place unburdened by memories. The divorce decree was finalized a few weeks later. Mark, largely due to the irrefutable evidence he had presented, secured a favorable settlement, retaining most of his assets and avoiding any significant alimony payments. It was a victory, legally speaking. But as he signed the final documents, a heavy silence settled over him. The battle was won, but the war had left its scars. 889 word count. The ink on the divorce decree was drawn, the shared house sold, and Mark had settled into his new apartment. He told himself it was over, that he could finally move on. Yet the emotional scars ran deeper than he had anticipated. The satisfaction of winning the legal battle was fleeting, quickly replaced by a hollow ache, a profound emptiness that settled in his chest. He threw himself into his work with renewed vigor. The promotion Mr. Albright had hinted at came through, a senior analyst position with a significant pay raise. He was good at his job, and in the structured, logical world of corporate systems, he found a temporary refuge from the chaos of his personal life. Colleagues respected him, his projects were successful, but the quiet hum of the office couldn't fill the void. He tried dating. Cautiously, he accepted invitations, went on a few dinners. The women were pleasant, interesting even, but he found it impossible to trust. Every friendly gesture, every casual comment was analyzed, dissected, searching for hidden motives, for the subtle signs of deceit he now expected. He couldn't open up, couldn't allow himself to be vulnerable. The memory of Sarah's betrayal, the cold realism of her actions, had built an impenetrable wall around his heart. The lingering bitterness was a constant companion. Then Sarah reached out, first a text. "Mark, I know I messed up. I'm really struggling. Can we talk?" Then a phone call. Her voice was thin, desperate. He heard the underlying plea for assistance, perhaps a chance to rekindle something, anything. His answer was firm, unwavering. "There's nothing to talk about, Sarah. It's over." He blocked her number, then her email address. He had spent too much emotional energy extracting himself from her orbit to allow her back in, even for a moment. The finality was absolute. Gary Hayes, Mark learned through the thin veil of town gossip, was also facing the harsh realities of his choices. His business had faltered, clients wary of the scandal. His wife Susan had ensured he lost not only his family, but also a significant portion of his wealth in the divorce. His reputation, once solid, was now in tatters. He was seen occasionally at a different, less respectable bar on the edge of town, a shadow of his former self. Mark often found himself reflecting on the path he had taken. The intricate revenge, the cold precision with which he had dismantled their lives. Was it worth it? He'd ask himself during sleepless nights, staring at the ceiling of his sterile new apartment. The answer was unclear. He had achieved what he set out to do: justice, accountability, but the cost to his own soul felt immense. The emptiness lingered, the feeling that something vital had been irrevocably broken within him. He eventually sought counseling, a decision prompted by a quiet, nagging feeling that he couldn't simply move on by ignoring the damage. He needed to acknowledge the emotional damage the affair and the subsequent events had caused. The therapist, a kind, older woman, listened patiently, helping him untangle the complex web of anger, betrayal, and the surprising grief for a life that had never truly existed. His family, especially his sister, offered a much-needed support system. They didn't pry, but their presence was a grounding force. Old friends, the ones who had stuck by him, provided distraction and a sense of continuity. He learned to appreciate the simpler, more authentic connections in his life, away from the grand expectations of a perfect marriage that had turned out to be nothing but a fragile illusion. He bought a small house on the outskirts of town, a place with a modest yard and a view of the distant cornfields. It was a fresh start, a space he could truly make his own, free of the old ghosts and the weight of past betrayals. He painted the walls a calming blue, bought new furniture, and started a small garden. The quiet Midwestern landscape, once the backdrop for his surveillance, now became a silent witness to his slow internal recovery. The wounds were still there, but they were beginning to scar slowly, painstakingly, allowing a fragile new life to emerge. Years passed, bringing with them a quiet rhythm to Mark's life. He was more settled, successful in his career at Donaldson's, now leading a significant department, and cautiously optimistic about the future. The sharp edges of betrayal had softened, rounded by time and introspection. He maintained a healthy distance from Sarah. He heard snippets of news occasionally, usually through the periphery of his former social circle. She had tried to start over in a different town, but the stain of her reputation seemed to follow her. Attempts at new real estate ventures floundered. Potential employers were wary, references thin. Her past actions, meticulously documented by Mark, had a long shadow. Gary Hayes, too, attempted a comeback, trying to leverage old contacts for new development projects. But his name remained synonymous with scandal. Investors were hesitant, partners preferred to keep their distance. The financial damage and social ostracism had proven enduring. Mark observed the long-term impact of his calculated revenge, seeing the permanent consequences on all involved. It wasn't a quick, explosive burn, but a slow, persistent erosion of their former lives. He often visited his uncle, a man of quiet wisdom who lived on a farm outside of town. During one of their talks, while watching the sunset over vast cornfields, Mark reflected on the value of integrity and the harsh lessons life had imparted. His uncle, without knowing the full details of Mark's past, simply said, "A man's word and his actions, well, they're the only things he truly owns. Everything else can be taken." Mark understood, the words resonating deeply. A new relationship blossomed for Mark, a quiet, gentle connection with Eleanor. She was a librarian, a woman with kind eyes and a steady presence. She understood his past, not through gossip, but through his carefully chosen words, his guarded nature. She didn't judge it, she simply accepted it, offering a space of quiet companionship and genuine understanding. With Eleanor, he found himself slowly, tentatively, letting down his guard. He was learning to trust again, to differentiate between the bitter past and the hopeful present. He often found himself confronting the moral implications of his actions. Was the meticulous destruction of Sarah and Gary's lives truly ethical? He acknowledged that while his actions were justified by their betrayal, his chosen path was also one of deep pain, not only for them but for himself. Revenge doesn't always taste sweet, he admitted to himself one evening, watching Eleanor read on the couch, the quiet domesticity, a stark contrast to the tumult of his past. The satisfaction he had initially felt had long since faded, replaced by a more complex understanding. He realized that true peace came not from punishing others, but from the arduous process of forgiving himself for the pain he had carried, and for the choices he made in response to betrayal. It came from letting go. The drone, the instrument of his initial discovery, and the catalyst for his entire plan, once a symbol of his rage, now took on a different meaning. It became a symbol of his ability to see truth, even when that truth was painful, to look beyond surface appearances. He hadn't flown it in years, but sometimes he would take it out, hold it, remembering the moment it had shown him everything and how it had forced him to finally see. Mark made a conscious, daily effort to let go of the anger that had fueled him for so long. He understood it served no purpose in his present life, only weighing him down. He focused on building a future based on honesty, on genuine connection with Eleanor, on authentic relationships with friends and family. The expansive Midwestern landscape, which had once been the scene of quiet, simmering betrayal, now offered a different kind of quiet, one of peace. It was a hard-won peace, but it was real. Years had folded into seasons, and Mark Jensen's life had found a new, quiet equilibrium. The frantic pursuit of justice, the cold calculations, had given way to a deep sense of self-awareness and stability. He was content. That feeling, so elusive for so long, now settled in his bones. His relationship with Eleanor continued to deepen. Their connection was built on trust, on long, quiet conversations about shared values, on mutual respect. It was a stark contrast to the performative aspects of his previous marriage, a relationship that had always felt a little too fragile, too much like a role he was playing. With Eleanor, there was an honesty, a gentle understanding that allowed him to be simply Mark, flaws and all. Professionally, his life thrived. He was a respected leader at Donaldson's, known for his integrity and keen insight. His work was no longer an escape, but a meaningful contribution, a space where his skills truly mattered. He enjoyed mentoring younger colleagues, offering not just business advice, but also quiet wisdom on navigating life's unexpected challenges. He had seen enough to know that everyone eventually faced their own unforeseen storms. He often reflected on his journey from the devastating betrayal to this place of quiet healing. He recognized the strength he had found within himself, the capacity to endure, to rebuild. He sometimes saw or heard about Sarah and Gary. Sarah was still in the adjacent town, working odd jobs, her past a persistent whisper. Gary Hayes had tried to rebuild his development business, but the old scandal clung to him like a burr, preventing any real resurgence. Mark felt no triumph when he heard these things, only a quiet understanding of life's complex and enduring consequences. Their paths were their own, chosen by their actions. The idea of forgiveness, not for them, but for himself, had slowly begun to take root. Forgiving himself for the anger, for the pain he had inflicted, for the time he had lost. It was a difficult, ongoing process, but necessary for true peace. A new passion had bloomed. Flying. Not the drone which sat boxed in his closet, a relic of a past chapter and a painful lesson learned. This was different. He had earned his pilot's license for small planes, rediscovering his childhood joy with a renewed sense of freedom. Up in the air, the world below looked ordered, peaceful. He could see for miles, the patchwork fields, the winding rivers, the small towns, all laid out with a clarity that grounded him. He embraced the quiet rhythms of his Midwestern life, finding unexpected beauty in its simplicity and honesty. The sunrises over the fields, the smell of fresh-cut hay, the easy familiarity of neighbors. He understood now that true happiness wasn't about avoiding pain or meticulously controlling every outcome. It was about enduring the pain, learning from it, and choosing to build something new, something authentic, from the ashes of what was lost. Mark Jensen, the man who had once sought perfect control, who had meticulously orchestrated a precise unraveling, now found peace in accepting life's imperfections. He drove down a familiar rural road, the sun setting in a blaze of orange and purple over endless fields, the vast horizon finally, truly his own.